There are certainly a lot of features in the main Outlook window, lots of things to discover and explore before we even start into creating and managing information. But when it comes down to it, the inbox is the heart of Outlook. Not only does it receive our incoming emails from our family, our friends, and our colleagues, but it really is the lifeblood of Outlook because it's used to communicate system information too, like read receipts and meeting requests. So before we ever get too far into discussions about how to use Outlook, I like to take a quick high-level look at the inbox itself, kind of get familiar and comfortable with it because it is the foundation of almost everything that we do in Outlook, at least in one way or another. When we first look at the inbox, what we're going to notice is that it might look a little bit comfortable if we've seen it before, but in some ways it might look a little strange or something different about it. This is part of that minimalistic appearance that we now have with Outlook. A better way to put it might be that it's been simplified. For example, in the old days, when we would look at an email message, we would see a little envelope icon on the left-hand side. If the envelope was closed, we knew that we had not read the message yet. After we read the message, the envelope was opened, so it was very visual. Some of that kind of detail is gone, or at least it's been modified. If we look carefully at these messages, we'll see that some have a blue bar on the left-hand side, and some of them do not. This blue bar has replaced the little envelope. It's sleeker and a little more contemporary, if you will. The blue bar means that a message is unread. No bar means that the message has been read. And of course, unread messages do still show up in bold, but they're not quite as bold as they used to be either. Another one of those subtle changes. If we're asking why these things have been done, we have to remember that sleeker and less obtrusive is important because part of the transformation in Office 2013 is to take into account the number of people using applications on mobile devices. In those cases, space is everything, so little changes like this can make a big difference. We will discuss some of the many options we have for messages in other places because we don't want to get into all of the awesome options that Outlook gives us behind those visual indicators right now. But notice that when we pause over a message, we do get to see some little icons for that message that simply aren't there when we're not paused over it. For example, we can see a little flag and we can see a red X. This has to do with some of the added functionality that's now available right in this pane without having to use the reading pane or having to open the message. For example, with a single tap, we can flag a message for follow-up. With a single tap, we can now delete a message, and we couldn't do that before, at least not from this particular area. And if we read a message and then wanted to mark it as unread, we can also move back to the left-hand edge, kind of display the grayed out bar at the moment, give that a single tap or a click, and we can mark a message as unread without having to display a right-click menu. So we can see that in many ways, some of the functionality hasn't changed necessarily, but it's been simplified, and it's available for us when we need it by pausing over a message. This is going to be especially important for those who will be dragging and tapping instead of using a traditional mouse and keyboard. By moving around the screen less, it's going to make access easier. There is one more feature that I wanted to mention. You may have noticed that in addition to the sender and the subject line, we also get to see the first line of a message by default. This is not a new feature. It's actually been in Outlook for years and years, but it used to be off by default, and now it's turned on because of the focus on mobile devices where people may not have the reading pane open and have very limited, narrow access to screen space. What we're talking about here can be turned on or off and modified by activating the View tab. Directly below the tab, we see an option called Message Preview. We can turn it completely off. We can show 1, 2, or 3 lines of a message by simply clicking or tapping the options. When you make a change, it wants to know if you want to change it just in this folder or in all of your mailboxes. We'll say this folder. And now you can see a lot more information without even having to go to the reading pane. But again, it does take up a lot more space. And for my purposes, I don't want to have this on. I use the reading pane, don't typically work with this on a mobile device, so this is just kind of cluttering up this particular view of the folder. We're going to go ahead and go back to Message Preview, and in this case, turn it off. But this is one of those highly customizable options that you get to set the way you want it to work and to display. Once again, these may seem like little changes, and in some ways they are, but they give Outlook a completely different look and a different feel than it had before. For those who used Outlook before, it's still a familiar interface. But as we continue to discover, it also gives Outlook kind of an updated way to work, that works better for today's devices and sometimes the way we just work today as well.